My name is Erich Hoyt, and I'm a research fellow with the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society, and I head its Global Marine Protected Areas Critical Habitat Program. Whales and dolphins are special to us because they tell us a lot about the ocean. They are tethered to the surface, and so they need to come up for air. And that allows us to see them a lot more than other animals in the ocean. So we can, if we know that they're doing okay, that they're alive, that they're with their families, that they're coming back to some of the same areas every year, then we have an idea that the ocean ecosystems are healthy. On the other hand, if we see them caught in nets, as we often do, something like 300,000 whales and dolphins die every year caught in nets, or if we see them stranded on beaches and we examine them and look at their tissues and we see that there's pollution, contaminants there, then we know that the ocean needs some help. So they're great monitors, but they're also great umbrella species. So if we are able to protect them, we can bring in a lot of other animals and we can bring in ecosystems. Whales and dolphins are also charismatic species, and they attract the public. So it's a fantastic way to get people interested in the ocean and to care about what's happening out there. So we see whales and dolphins just having these multiple ways of getting the public involved and young people, and hopefully having a future not only for whales and dolphins but for a lot of other animals at sea, the ecosystems that support those animals. Marine protected areas are pieces of the ocean that we've decided to set aside to protect, to allow biodiversity to flourish, to allow all the animals, not just whales and dolphins, but all the animals and the ecosystems that support them to flourish, and so that we have a future for that part of the ocean. We have multiple reasons why we want to use the ocean. People want to go fishing, people want to use the ocean for travel. A lot of our shipping happens by sea. We go on cruises. You know, we do lots of things in the ocean. We also are getting oil out of the ocean from deep sea wells, and we're getting energy now. So we have these mixed reasons for using the ocean, and I think that if we zone the ocean, we will be able to do a lot of these things. But if we don't decide that we're going to protect a substantial part of the ocean and allow it to support the whole ocean, then the whole system is not going to work, and we'll have a lot of trouble down the line. How do I hope that marine protected areas will be managed in the future? Well, management for marine protected areas is a big issue. We're at the point now where we're starting to get a few marine protected areas worldwide, and people are wondering, you know, how do we actually manage these things? How do we take care of a portion of the sea? You can't put fences up around it in the same way you can on land. The animals are moving around, they're mobile. Whales and dolphins are, you know, sometimes traveling up to 5, 6, 7,000 miles in a single year, although they are coming back to the same places. So there are some big challenges with managing these areas, and we're doing it with a lot of fancy equipment. We're starting to think about remote sensing and giving boats that might be fishing sensors, you know, that are connected to satellites, so we can then track where they are. We're putting satellite tags on all kinds of turtles and sharks and finding out where they go. We're using a lot of kind of high-tech instruments, even iPhones and iPods are now starting to be used to bring in some of this information and make it really accessible for people. But the management is also about the trying to get the area, trying to get marine protection enshrined in government. So it's not something that's automatically established in government. You don't have a minister of the ocean. Probably every country should have a minister of the ocean. But so it's taking time to manage what are the threats to these animals in a positive way that can actually make these effective areas for protection. How will correctly managed marine protected areas help wildlife? This is what our goal is, obviously, to try to see if we can get a high quality of management. All the marine protected areas now that have been created over the last 10 or 15 years are really, well, they start out as pieces of paper, and there is a criticism that they're on paper only, but they have to start out somewhere. And as we learn more, we're getting, they're becoming effective. There are managers who say we can't actually manage the whales and dolphins and the animals. We can only manage the people and their relationships with them. And that's actually kind of true in a way. The animals are out there. We have to provide the conditions for them. We have to make sure that the seas are protected and that the ecosystems that are functioning continue to function to support their life. But what we're actually talking about, a lot of it is teaching people how to have a relationship with animals that allows them to survive and to be part of the ocean, important part of the ocean, and so protecting that biodiversity really means allowing these animals and these ecosystems to function, and managing the behavior of people, fishermen, people who are in boats, people who are sometimes in swimming if it's really close to land. All those relationships that we have with the sea, it doesn't mean we stop them, but we need to manage them carefully so we're allowing everything else, all that fantastic wildlife and biodiversity to survive as well. Why should young people be concerned about marine protected areas? Well, that's the future of the ocean. That's what you're going to see when, for the rest of your life. If you've protected it, if we've done a job in terms of the older generation of starting to think about this and putting our energy into doing a little bit, really the job has just barely begun. I mean, worldwide, 12% of the land is protected. Only 1.4% of the ocean is protected. So it's a tiny fraction. And in terms of high protection, where you don't do anything, you just leave it the way it is, they're only, it's something like 0.1%. I mean, it's a really, really tiny portion of the sea. And we need at least, 100 times more of, really high quality protection if we're going to have these things in the future. And so I think this is, the ocean, this is an ocean planet. 64% of the world is ocean, is actually high seas. Even more than that, 70+% is ocean. And if it supports us, Most of the animals and the biodiversity that we don't know about is in the ocean, is at the bottom of the sea and in the different layers. And we don't even know the names of these animals. You know, this is your future. I can see a time over the next, 10, well, it's already starting to happen, but the announcements of new species and new, each species is a story. They have fantastic life histories, and you can learn so much about them. And we just, some of the animals that the deep sea creatures that we just have very, very little clue about, are absolutely astonishing and, entrancing. People don't realize that even over the last 10 or 15 years, we've discovered new species of whales. This is an animal, 10 meters, 15 meters long, and we didn't know about it. I mean, the ocean is a really, really big place. It is our source for the future. It's not just curiosity, but it's possibly food and elements that for manufacturing and for things that go into phones and all kinds of things. So we need to protect it. It is our future. A lot of us got together about 10 years ago, and we realized there was something like 70 pieces of legislation that had to do with the ocean that that went back to, because Britain has such a long legal history, and we couldn't figure out how to even create marine protected areas. So a new set of laws had to be put together for the UK and also for Scotland and Wales, and those laws came in around 2010, 2011, just in the last couple of years, and now the UK is in this exciting process of figuring out what pieces of water it wants to create as marine protected areas. And we at the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society are looking at the whales and dolphins all around the UK. We have different research programs that are going on with Rizzo's dolphins in the Hebrides, and with bottlenose dolphins for many years in Scotland and off Cornwall originally, and in Wales, quite a few programs in Wales, and Rizzo's dolphins and minke whales, harbor porpoises. And so we've made maps of where we think the important areas are. Other groups interested in sharks have focused on where the basking sharks are and some of the other sharks. So we're putting all this information together right now. And I think this is something that is not just for scientists, this is for communities and for all ages to be involved in. There are meetings that are happening. There's a lot of online information that you can get about this. We've made appeals through the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society to try to get people who like whales or are interested in dolphins to put their boat in to try and get them to say that they are interested in having these animals around, because there are a lot of competing interests. We have renewable power now going out. The renewables industry is putting up these wind farms out at sea, and we have oil rigs going up and oil exploration. We have a lot of fishing, and all these have some place, but we also want to have some really nice protected areas. So it's really important for every person living in the UK to take an interest in this. This is the future. It's going to be decided over the next year or two. So it's if you have care at all about the ocean and what the future is going to be like. And if you want to have whales and dolphins visiting and other animals, then get involved. What can young people do to help the ocean and also to learn more about marine protected areas and try and do something about it? I think there are a number of things. One would be to help with beach cleans, to go out to help. These periodically happen in different parts of the country. There's a lot of garbage that comes in from the sea, but it's also people that are going to the sea that leave it, and then it can be carried back into the ocean. That's a kind of starts to develop your connection to the sea. You could adopt a dolphin or a whale. Then you're thinking about that particular whale or dolphin and where it goes in the ocean, what place, what is its home. And in many cases, Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society can actually tell you where that dolphin lives, or roughly what kind of protected area it is near. So that gives you a connection. But you can go online. There's a tremendous amount of information about these areas. If meetings are happening in your area, they are open to whole communities. And I think that's a great interest. That's a great thing you can do. You can also bother your parents and bother your teachers, because if they don't start getting the message about protection of the ocean and how important it is, it's going to be much more difficult for it to happen. This is something we all need to kick in to try and make happen if we want it to happen. The sea is vast. We live on an ocean planet, and how do we protect it? It's really, really difficult. I mean, this is the challenge that we have. We have gone around and, met the challenge of protecting the land to some extent. We've protected 12% of the land. We're now standing at just a little bit more than 1% of the sea being protected, and we need more like 10 or 20% of it. We have to start with every country getting involved with a marine protected area program, and that has happened now over the last 10 or 15 years. Then we have to look at every community, especially coastal communities that have this relationship with the sea and the people that are in them. It's really up to every citizen to become involved in this process. This is our ocean planet. This is the planet that sustains us, the ocean. We came out of the ocean. A lot of our food comes from there. A lot of our mystery, the animals we don't know about, 1 million or more species, they say, that we don't even have names for, are out there in the ocean. And there's a lot there that reasons we need to protect, that will give us motivation for this huge task. Well, in 2004, I published a book, Marine Protected Areas for Whales, Dolphins, and Porpoises. And it was an attempt to bring together two radically different fields: the field of whale and dolphin and porpoise research, and the field of marine protection. How do we go about protecting pieces of the sea? And those people had not really been talking together up until that point, and I was trying to synthesize that. And now, 6, 7 years later, 8 years later, we're at a situation where a lot has happened to start protecting whale and dolphin areas at sea, and it's quite exciting. We have some large areas where, whales can actually look to, they can think about, well, they're not going to be thinking about it, but we have large areas at sea now where whales and dolphins are protected, and they can return and bring their young and breed and feed, and we're looking at how much more there is to do. I mean, we realize that this is just starting. And the number of marine protected areas from the first edition of the book to now has increased dramatically. The methods that we're starting to use to survey really large areas of the ocean and to incorporate data sets that range from where all the whales and dolphins are, where the sharks are, where the seabirds are. All these layers of knowledge we're putting into data sets that we can put on top of each other, and we can start to get an idea of what that real ocean looks like, and where the biodiversity is, and what we want to protect. And we're also trying to put in the threats, because that's the other thing we need to know about. Where are whales and dolphins and other animals getting hit by ships or getting caught in nets? Where are these trouble spots? Pollution, oil spills, where are they happening? And so when we put all that information together, we start to get a really fine picture. And so this is happening. These are the conferences and workshops that I've been attending in the last couple of years and that are coming up. And it's a really exciting time, because we're now, people have started to realize that whales and dolphins and other sea creatures need habitat as well as these land animals. They're not just swimming out there in the ocean, in any sort of ocean. They have really specific requirements that have to do with the temperature of the sea, what the bottom's like, what other animals are there that they can feed on, all these delicate, subtle things. And so that's why I've done the new edition, to really try to put all these together. And I started out trying to rewrite 10% of the book, and after a year realized it had to be completely rewritten. And so it's expanded substantially and rewritten.
Aren't marine protected areas currently just protecting tiny bits of ocean?
Marine protected areas are currently protecting very small pieces of ocean. There are only 10 or 15, 20 that protect substantial areas that would be of a size that could protect large predators like whales and dolphins, sharks, and other animals that are highly mobile. So one thing that we need to do is to think big, even bigger than on land. Because on land, animals move around, but in the ocean is moving itself. It would be as if the ground were moving if you were on land. The ocean is moving. It's also multi-layered, and it's moving sometimes in different directions at different layers. And you have a situation where you need to think much bigger, in order to protect the habitats that are there. So we need larger areas. We need to zone them so that some are highly protected and some are areas where you can have whale watching and other activities going on, and some artisanal fishing, local fishing goes on. But really a good balance has to be struck. Positive examples for protected areas for whales and dolphins are few and far between. It's really, we're at the beginning of this stage. There have been some now, there have been some areas created in the Pacific, large areas. The Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, which is in the northwest Hawaiian Islands, is about 350,000 square kilometers and is protecting humpback whales and quite a few other spinner dolphins, a lot of really interesting whales, dolphins, and sharks. And it is really the one area. I mean, it's highly protected. The government is buying out the fishing rights there. So this is going to be a really interesting experimental area to see how high protection will function. The Great Barrier Reef is an example that's often given. That was actually one of the very first marine protected areas. It started out with about 10% high protection levels, and they allowed a lot of fishing to continue and other things. And then they found that the coral reefs were degrading and they needed more protection, so they went back, and then about 10 years ago decided to protect a third of it. So they went up from 10% to 33% high protection. Still not 100% or 50, it could be higher. But that's an ongoing experiment that is really interesting. A lot of people are looking at because it has a longer timeline than any other area. It was the first. And it has functioned effectively at some level for whales and dolphins. The trouble with long-lived animals like whales and dolphins, it takes quite a while to see whether you've actually made a difference. Many countries and regions of the world are now starting to plan marine protected areas, not just for whales and dolphins, but for all creatures and ecosystems at sea. And it's quite exciting, very exciting time to be involved in all of this. However, it's really just started. If you look at the land, there's 12% of the land has been protected. The sea, it's just a little bit more than 1%. We have started to think about the idea of networks of marine protected areas, so that, for example, if you have a whale that's feeding off Iceland or off Greenland, for example, the humpback whales, and then they're traveling several thousand miles to the Caribbean or to off Africa to breed, because they breed in warm waters and raise their calves. How do you protect all that? You're not going to protect the whole ocean. So through a network of protected areas, you could protect several of the feeding areas, for example, and then you could have several areas along the way. For example, these humpback whales often stop in Bermuda for a few weeks, on their way to the Caribbean, and that's actually an area where they are protecting them to some extent. And then when they're in the Caribbean, they're really in fairly restricted waters. They like these sort of sandy areas. The males sing in particular areas, with their heads down, all together. And these are kind of known habitats that actually are true not only in the Caribbean, but you can map the conditions, and you can repeat it in Hawaii and other parts of the world where this particular humpback whale is found. And so if we can find out all these areas, then we can create a network and have joined up thinking with researchers working at both ends of the migration and in the middle as well, and the managers of these marine protected areas working together for protection. So that sort of joined up thinking is now starting to happen. And then when that, as that happens more and more, I think we're starting to come to grips with the problem. The other major deficit that we have is money, because people think let's just name this as a marine protected area, and they don't bother to set up a management body. Some of them don't even have management plans. Management plan is your script for how you're going to, make this place happen. But it takes money, and it takes involvement of communities and countries to really focus on creating these management situations that will work. And then you need enforcement. Enforcement is really difficult on land, to keep people in line and to make sure that poaching doesn't happen and all that sort of thing. It's even more difficult at sea. There are some things that are happening with surveillance technology, electronics, and that's very exciting, and will make it a lot cheaper and a lot more possible to do this. But you still need human presence. You know, you need people out there who are both talking to people and educating them about why it's important to do conservation, as well as putting fines, you know, and you know, people that are really abusing the system, you know, catching far too many fish or killing outright, have to be punished. So it's a multi-pronged problem, and there's a lot of attention. We're really just at the beginning, and we need to focus on all these different aspects if we want to make it work. There's lots happening below the ocean that we don't know about. There are, you know, more than 1 million species that we know. I mean, perhaps lots more. The ocean is not a homogeneous place. It's not one place. It's like lots of different layers. As you get deeper, the pressure gets more intense. The pressure on the bodies. I remember from an oceanography vessel once, we decided we were going to put down one of these hat model heads that you see that made out of styrofoam, just to see what would happen with the pressure. We dropped it over the side. Actually, we attached it to the CTD, it's called. It's the instrument package that records the conductivity and the temperature and the depth of the ocean. We attached it to the side and put it down. And it wasn't a very deep measurement that we were taking, but we wanted to see what would happen. And we had some young oceanographers on board, and we just said, well, this is what would happen if you fell overboard. We pulled it up, and it was shrunken to the size of a pea, you know, just from that intense pressure of being underwater. A lot of magic is happening underwater. You have the color red, for example. We have on land red. If you see a red animal, that's a danger sign. You know, stay away from me, don't eat me. You know, that's the nature, that's the message that animal gives out. It's completely different underwater. If you're a red animal, you can actually avoid detection at depth. At a certain depth, the red light no longer is readable by other creatures. So you can be invisible if you're red. And some creatures will even communicate on different light wavelengths with each other. And they'll have their own communication channel, just like a radio channel or a radio signal that we use on land. And it's just for those creatures. Sometimes they will have different light that will send out warning signals to other animals to avoid them or to try and lure them in. The famous deep sea anglerfish and the dragonfish often have these long barbels hanging down from their chins with lures, lights, right at the end. And it sort of is telling other creatures, you know, well, it's luring them in, but then when they come in, they miss the creature because they're down here. So it's a kind of a fake, a tease. And then sometimes they can just turn around and eat that creature. And they have mouths. These dragonfish have mouths on hinges that are so wide that they can actually take in animals that are their own size or maybe even a little bit larger. They open up completely and they just take them like that. So it's such an exciting area, the deep sea. And there's so many things, so many different things going on depending on what layer you're on. That's our exciting future, what we have to learn about if we care, if we protect the sea. I wanted to talk about the Costa Rica Dome Marine Protected Area, a proposed marine protected area in the eastern tropical Pacific. This is a fantastic area. on the high seas in international waters, but also a little part of it in the waters of Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. Mostly on the high seas, though. And it's an area where blue whales come to feed as well as to breed. It's one of the very few areas where blue whales do both of these things in the same place. So they bring their calves here, but they also have a chance to feed. It's a very productive area. There are also humpback whales here, several kinds of dolphins, spotted, spinner dolphins, a lot of turtles, the sea turtles, endangered sea turtles that travel from the beaches of Costa Rica, and you get Costa Rican people that are helping them, protecting them when they come up on the shore, and helping them with burying their eggs and that sort of thing before the turtles return to sea. Those turtles are coming out to the Costa Rica Dome, some of them. They've tracked them. And so it's really important we're trying to make a connection now to the people in Central America, to this sort of magical area, which is really important for all of us. I mean, the blue whale is our iconic, the largest, the blue whale is really our iconic animal on Earth. It's the largest animal that ever lived, at up to 30 meters, more than 100 feet long for the record female. And they are endangered. There are somewhere on the order of 10 or 11,000 left. There were once 300,000 of them before the whalers got to them. So we have these little fragment populations. The most healthy of those world fragments is in the eastern tropical Pacific. So it's good news that they're doing better there, but that's the population that we really need to nurture and make sure that their habitat is protected so that we have blue whales on our planet in the next century and in the centuries to come.